السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم، أكرمنا بنور الفهم، وافتح علينا بمعرفة العلم، وحسن أخلاقنا بالحلم، واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering. I ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our intentions. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which is beneficial and to help us benefit from what He teaches us. I ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us see truth as truth, to help us acknowledge truth as truth, and give us the ability to follow that truth. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to acknowledge falsehood as falsehood, and give us the ability to shun that falsehood. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah ta'ala, the program for today is very simple. We're going to have 3 sessions, inshallah. Each session will be about 1 hour long, except for the first session. The first session will be a little bit longer. So we're starting at 2:30, inshallah. Around 3:45, we will take our first break. Okay? 3:45 to 4 o'clock, we'll have a break, inshallah. There will be some refreshments for you outside. Then 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock will be the second session. And then 5 to 5:15 will be another break. And then from 5:15 to 6:15 will be the third final session. Then 6:30 is Salatul Asr, inshallah. There's going to be 3 major topics that we're going to discuss in these 3 sessions. In the first session, which is the longest session, we will talk about moon sighting. And we will talk about moon sighting from 2 different angles. One angle is the fiqhi angle, and the other angle is the scientific angle. We'll talk about the fiqh of moon sighting and the science of sighting as well. In the second hour, inshallah, we will talk about the fiqh of fasting. Rulings related to fasting, who has to fast, who may not fast, what do people do who do not fast, things related to kafara and fidya, things related to what breaks the fast, what doesn't break the fast, and so on. So that will be in the second hour, inshallah ta'ala. And then the final hour, we will talk about the spirit of etiquette of fasting. So that will be at the end. I am going to be using PowerPoint for the first hour, inshallah. I'm also going to be using the board. So I hope that for the sisters it will be visible, inshallah. If it's not, then they can feel free to position themselves in such a way that they can see. I have put a phone number on the board, and that is for you to ask questions. Inshallah, you will have an opportunity to raise your hands and ask questions, but sometimes people feel more comfortable submitting written questions. So if you want to submit a written question, just send the question as a text message to this number, and it will come on my phone. Okay? So just type your question and send it as a text message to this number, and I will answer it once I get a chance, inshallah. So that's for brothers as well as for the sisters. In case the sisters cannot see the number that's written on the board, it's 972-379-7624. Again, it's 972-379-7624. I would also request, humbly, for the brothers to come closer, if you can. If you have a back problem, well, you guys are already close, mashallah, but I'm talking about the ones that are in the back. If you have a back problem, I don't mind if you use a chair. You can use a chair, inshallah. just be behind those who are sitting on the floor so they can have a clear view, inshallah. This is for the barakah of ilm. Part of adab, of learning the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal is to come closer. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala add barakah by you doing this, inshallah ta'ala. Let us begin with the first topic, which has to do with the fiqh of moon sighting. I would like to start out by reminding myself and you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, they ask you, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they ask you concerning the ahillah. Ahillah is the plural of hilal. Hilal is translated as the crescent moon. So they ask you concerning the ahillah, the crescent. Tell them, say to them, قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ حَجٍّ. Tell them that these hilals that appear in the sky, they have been placed there as a way for people to find out what time of the year they're in. هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. They are there to help people calculate time. They're there to help people tell what time of the year they're in. And they're also there to help people tell when Hajj is coming. وَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. So this ayah tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed this physical object in the sky for us to tell the time of the year. As a result, Muslims have followed a lunar calendar for 1400 years. We follow the lunar calendar. Now, there is a month in which we have to fast. That is the month of Ramadan, which is the 9th month of the lunar calendar. And since the fasting of the month of Ramadan is a pillar of Islam, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, it becomes very important for us to ask the question, when does this month begin and when does this month end? Because if we fast a day before Ramadan, that's not obligatory. And if we fast after Ramadan, that's not obligatory. In order to fulfill the obligation of fasting the month of Ramadan, which is a pillar of Islam, it's not just something encouraged, it's something obligatory, not just obligatory, but a pillar of Islam. We have to ascertain that we are fasting at the right time, in the right month. So our ulama have discussed this issue of how do we establish the month of Ramadan? How do we establish the month of Ramadan? Based on the Quran and the Sunnah, the vast majority of our ulama have concluded that there are 2 ways to figure out whether the month of Ramadan has begun or not. There are 2 ways to figure out whether the month of Ramadan has begun or not. And that is either by completing 30 days of Sha'ban. After the 30th day of Sha'ban, the next day is definitely the first day of Ramadan. Or if the hilal is sighted on the 29th day, after the 29th day of Sha'ban. If on that night, after 29 days have passed, if on that night the hilal is sighted, then that establishes that the next day is Ramadan. These are the 2 methods in establishing the month of Ramadan. Okay? Now, there are ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ about that as well. One, for example, in which he said, ﷺ, إِنَّا أُمَّةٌ أُمِّيَّةٌ لَا نَكْتُبُ وَلَا نَحْسِبُ الشَّهْرُ هَكَذَا وَهَكَذَا. And he used his hands to indicate both times. He did not speak. What does this mean? He said, إِنَّا أُمَّةٌ أُمِّيَّةٌ لَا نَكْتُبُ وَلَا نَحْسِبُ. We are an unlettered ummah. We are an ummah that is unlettered. We do not write and we do not calculate. The month is like this or like this. Okay? Indicating with his hands 30 or 29. But it's very interesting that he didn't speak. He used a gesture forcing you to see, forcing you to look. It's very interesting. He doesn't even want to say the number 29 or 30, which is an expression of a computation. He wants you to look at something. It's very interesting. It's as if he is telling us in a subtle manner that you have to look at something. Okay? And based on the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, for example, there's another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is related by Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال ولا تفطروا حتى تروه. Do not fast until you see the hilal, and do not end your fast until you see it. Okay? This is a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. There's another hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, قُومُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ وَأَفْطِرُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ. Fast when you see it, the hilal, and end your fast when you see it. فَإِنْ حَالَتْ دُونَهُ غِيَابَةٌ فَأَكْمِلُوا 30 يَوْمًا. وفي لفظ البخاري فإن غم عليكم فأكملوا عدة شعبان 30. Then he said that if it's cloudy and you cannot see, then complete 30 days of Sha'ban. So if on the 29th day it's clouded, you cannot see, then you complete 30 days of Sha'ban according to the riwayah of Bukhari. So based on these texts, the majority of the ulama are of the opinion that the month of Ramadan can only be established by ru'yah, by a physical sighting of the hilal. And it cannot be established using computation. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, do not fast until you see the hilal. حَتَّى تَرَوُا الْهِلَالِ. Do not fast until you see the hilal. And do not end your fast until you see the hilal. Okay? Now, the Prophet ﷺ, you know, was a prophet who receives divine guidance, who speaks very eloquently. He said about himself, أُوتِيتُ جَوَامِعَ الْكَلِمِ. I was given the treasures of eloquence. And the Arabic language is very rich. It's not a poor language with limited vocabulary. It has a very vast vocabulary. Just to give you an idea, you know, if you've looked at some dictionaries, English dictionaries, you know, the largest English dictionary that you've seen would probably be about this thick. One thick volume. You know, the Arabic dictionaries, like Lisanul Arab, is like this big. You know, it's multi-volume. Why is that? Because the language is so rich. Okay? So, a man who is using such a rich language, and on top of that, he is given the treasures of eloquence. And on top of that, he receives messages from the divine. If he wanted to, he could have used language that was more ambiguous so that it could allow for other possibilities. He could have said, for example, do not fast until the month begins. Then we could talk about how to determine the beginning of the month. Maybe we can compute the beginning of the month. If he said that, if he said, do not fast until the month begins. Or he could have said, do not fast until the moon is born. He could have said that. There's a word for that in the Arabic language. Muhaq is a moon that is born, versus hilal, which is different, that we will talk about, inshallah. He could have used that. He could have said that. But he didn't use any of that. He said, hatta taraw, hatta, until you see the hilal. Okay? So the language that is used by the Prophet ﷺ is very specific. And he's using language until the end of time. So based on this, the majority of the ulama, like I said, are of the view that the month of Ramadan is only established when one sees the hilal. The exception is that when there is no hilal, or when the hilal cannot be seen, then you finish 30 days of Sha'ban, and then you begin the month of Ramadan on the next day, because the lunar month cannot be more than 30 days or less than 29 days, based on the other hadith that I mentioned to you. Now one wonders why the Prophet ﷺ and Allah Azza wa Jal, the lawgiver, why did they condition the beginning of the lunar month on sighting the hilal? Why not on computing the existence of the new moon? For example, why didn't they do it that way? And the ulama have mentioned a very beautiful wisdom behind it. And the wisdom behind that is because the deen of Islam is for all people and for all times. It's not just for the astronomers. It's not just for the specialists. And therefore, since the pillar of fasting is such an important part of our deen, Allah Azza wa Jal connected it with something that everyone can do. Sighting the hilal is something that requires just a little bit of learning. If you do it a few times, you know how to do it. You go out and you look in the sky and you know where to look. And you know what to look for. And when you see it, then it's Ramadan. When you don't see it, it's not Ramadan. It's something that the farmer can do. It's something that a shepherd can do. It's something that an engineer can do. It's something that an older man can do, or a younger man can do. An educated person can do it. An uneducated person can do it. Okay? So it's supposed to make it easier for people to figure out when the month begins. But if it was hinged upon computation, then only the experts would be able to do it. I'm sure none of us here knows how to compute the birth of the moon. I'm sure none of us here knows, including myself, how to calculate the birth of the moon. Some people know how to do that, but there's some people. And therefore, since this is something that only a few people have knowledge of, and the deen of Islam is for everyone to follow, therefore Allah Azza wa Jal set a criteria that can be used by everyone, the lay person, the educated, as well as the uneducated, insha'Allah ta'ala. Now, another issue related to this is, what if somebody says, you know what, we know for sure that Sha'ban is going to be at least 29 days, right? And the next day is either going to be the 30th of Sha'ban or the 1st of Ramadan. So what if I fast that day with the intention that if it is Ramadan, then it is the fast of Ramadan, but if it is Sha'ban, then it's just a voluntary fast. That way I'll be safe. So, can I do that? Well, the answer is that the Prophet ﷺ told us not to do that. Because that day is called Yawm Shak. Yawm Shak. Yawm Shak is the day of doubt. And the majority of the ulama, based on the text of the Prophet ﷺ, the majority of the ulama, including the Hanafi school, and the Maliki school, and the Shafi'i school, and many of the Hanbali scholars as well, are of the opinion that it is not permissible to fast on the day of doubt. The day of doubt is defined as the 30th day of Sha'ban when the hilal is not sighted on the night before, regardless of whether the sky was clear or cloudy. Regardless of whether the sky was clear or cloudy. The 30th day, if there is no hilal sighted on the night before, that is called the day of doubt, according to the majority of the ulama, and they say it is not permissible to fast on that day because of a hadith in which one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, Ammar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, "Man sama al-yawm alladhi yushakku fihi faqad asa Abul Qasim." That whoever fasts on the day of doubt has disobeyed Abul Qasim. Who's Abul Qasim? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So, this is the majority opinion that it is not permissible to fast on the day of doubt. Now, obviously, not everyone goes out to hilal, even though they can, but practically speaking, it's not practical. You know, people have work to do, people have things to do. So, if someone sights the hilal, and they inform the others that I saw the hilal, can we accept the testimony of someone else, or does everyone have to sight the hilal? Since this deen is based on yusr, on ease, to alleviate unnecessary hardships, not all hardships, unnecessary hardships are alleviated in this deen. Therefore, Allah Azza wa Jal made it such that we can follow the testimony of others as long as certain conditions are met. We can't just follow the testimony of anybody. It has to be verified that this person is telling the right thing. And that is something that all the ulama agree on. That we don't just follow anybody's testimony. The testimony has to be confirmed, has to be verified. Now, how do you confirm and verify the testimony? That's where they differ. Okay? So they all agree, the Hanafis and the Malikis and the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, they all agree that you have to verify the report. But what is the criteria that you use to verify? They differ. So for example, one opinion is that if the sky is clear, then it has to be sighted by a large number of people. If just one or two people come and say, I sighted it, not going to be enough. The sky is clear, it has to be seen by a lot of people. Otherwise, if two, three people come and say, I sighted it, and nobody else saw it, that tells us that this testimony is not credible. Another view is that, well, it doesn't have to be a large number of people. It can be even a couple of people. But it has to be at least two. One is not enough. It has to be at least two. Okay? Either two men or one man and two women. Others say no, cannot be a woman. Has to be two men. Because women usually, in those days, they don't go out, they're not familiar with what the hilal looks like, so their testimony is not going to be reliable. Has to be two men. Others say, no, why two? One man is enough as long as that man is reliable. What do you mean reliable? It has to be a Muslim. It has to be a baligh. Has to be someone above the age of puberty. Has to be someone who has sanity, not an insane person. Has to be someone who is morally upright, who's not known to be a liar, who's not known to drink intoxicants, who's not known to miss his salawat, prays 5 times a day. Otherwise, The testimony is doubtful. We're not going to accept it. So on, different opinions. But the point is that there is criteria that has to be established for the reliability of that report. And what that criteria is, they differ. Some of them even allowed one female testimony. Okay? That is permissible according to the Maliki school. That even if one woman comes and testifies that tomorrow is Ramadan, we take her testimony as long as she's a Muslim, she is morally upright, she is above the age of puberty. They allow that for Ramadan, not for Shawwal. For Shawwal, they have a different opinion. They require more reliability for Shawwal. For Ramadan, they're more relaxed. Okay? But even that opinion, the woman has to fulfill certain criteria. It's a minority opinion. I'm just mentioning it in case you see someone establish the month of Ramadan based on a female sighting. They're not following a deviant view. It is one of the four schools of thought, but it is a very minority opinion. The majority opinion is that it has to be at least one male for the month of Ramadan, and 2 males for the month of Shawwal. Okay? But like I said, there are other views as well, but they all agree that it has to be someone who is reliable. Now, with regards to the month of Shawwal, again, there are different opinions. How to establish the month of Shawwal, how many people need to testify that they have seen the Hilal, and what their qualities need to be. In general, the ulama require more, they're stricter in establishing the month of Shawwal than they are in establishing the month of Ramadan. So for Shawwal, there's one opinion that requires, again, that has to be many people, not just 1 or 2 or 3. That's one opinion. The sky is clear, it has to be many people. Other opinions are that it has to be, only males are allowed. No female testimony allowed for the month of Shawwal. So these are different opinions about how to establish the reliability of the one who is providing the testimony. Now, coming back to the issue of computation. Like I said before, that the lawgiver has clearly indicated to us that the month of Ramadan and the month of Shawwal can only be established based on ru'ya, based on a physical sighting of the hilal, based on the text that I mentioned. لا تصوموا حتى تروا الهلال. Do not fast until you see the hilal. ولا تفطروا حتى تروا الهلال. And do not end your fast until you see the hilal. And hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. So based on this, like I said, the majority of the ulama said that it is not permissible to establish the month of Ramadan based solely on computations, on astronomical computations. The hilal actually has to be seen. You can use, many of the ulama have allowed the use of astronomical calculations to help with the visibility of the hilal. But it still has to be seen by the eye. Okay? Now, I wanted to share with you a quote of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, about this issue. He said that المعتمد على الحساب في الهلال ضال في الشريعة مبتدع في الدين. These are the words of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala. He said that the one who relies on astronomical calculations about the new moon is misguided, sharia, and an innovator, deen. Very strong language. Very strong language. So the next question is regarding the fiqh of moon sighting. The question is, what if the hilal is seen in one region, but it's not seen in another region? on the earth. Do all people on the globe have to follow the sighting of that region, or does every region do its own sighting? So for example, let's say that the Hilal is not sighted in Medina, but it's sighted in Sham, in Damascus. When the people of Medina find out that the people of Damascus have sighted the Hilal, do the people of Medina have to follow the sighting of Damascus? Or can they say, no, we're not concerned with the sighting of Damascus, we have to follow what we saw in our region? This is an issue that is a matter of different opinions, legitimate differences in opinion. Because the ulama have differed about this issue from the time of the Sahaba, from the time of the companions and the tabi'een and atba'u tabi'een. There are two views on this issue. This is a 14 centuries old debate, not a 20th century debate. Okay? One group of scholars argue that if the Hilal is sighted anywhere in the world, and it is established, confirmed, not just somebody saying it, not just some entity saying it, no. It's confirmed that the Hilal was sighted anywhere in the world, then everyone in the world has to abide by that sighting. And this opinion is called Wahdatul Matali'. In fiqh jargon, it's called Ittihadul Matali' or Wahdatul Matali'. And in English, it's loosely translated as the opinion of global sighting. Why global sighting? Because if it is sighted anywhere in the world, then the entire globe follows that sighting. This is the view of many of the ulama of the past. Okay? This is the view of the Hanafi school, and the Maliki school, and the Hanbali school. 3 out of the 4 schools, as a school, as a madhab, their official fatwa is Ittihadul Matali'. They have textual evidence for that. There's another opinion. Let me just finish this point and then the other opinion is that no, every region goes by their own sighting. So for example, in the example that I gave, if the Hilal is sighted in Damascus, but it's not sighted in Medina, the people of Damascus fast, but the people of Medina wait 1 day. This is the view also of many of the ulama of the past, including some of the Sahaba. In particular, out of the 4 schools of thought, this is the view of the Shafi'i school of thought as a school. Even though from other madahib there are individual ulama from the Hanbali school, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah sides with this view. The Hanbali school as a school has the first view, but Ibn Taymiyyah, despite being a Hanbali scholar, he sides with the view of the Shafi'i school. But as a school, the Shafi'i school is the only one out of the 4 schools that has the opinion of what's called Ikhtilaful Matali'. Ikhtilaful Matali'. The first opinion is termed Ittihadul Matali' or Wahdatul Matali'. The second opinion is called Ikhtilaful Matali', or in English is translated as local sighting, or more accurately, regional sighting. Regional sighting. Okay? So these 2 views are 2 different views. Both of them are old views, not 20th century views. These 2 views have existed since the time of the Sahaba, since the time of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. So inshallah, some of this I'm going to answer when I talk about the science of moon sighting in a few minutes. But just one thing I want to mention here, that the view of regional sighting, which is the view of the Shafi'i school, also has a basis for it. Just like the view of the majority has a basis for it, the view of the Shafi'i school also has a basis for it. And one of the evidences of what the Shafi'is say is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Well, not a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, but an incident that happened at the time of the Sahaba, which is known as Hadith Qurayb. Hadith of Qurayb. Qurayb was a young man who was from the Tabi'een, not a Sahabi. But he lived at the time of the Sahaba. So what happened was, al-Fadl, one of the female companions of the Prophet ﷺ, sent Qurayb to Muawiyah in Sham, in Damascus. So he sent him to do something in Sham, in Damascus. So Qurayb comes to Sham, to Damascus, where Muawiyah is the Khalifa, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And after he was there and doing what he needed to do, the month of Ramadan began. And it was announced that tomorrow is the month of Ramadan. And Qurayb is the one who's narrating the story. So he said that, I saw the hilal on Thursday night. I saw the hilal on Thursday night, on Laylatul Jumu'ah, and therefore, I saw the hilal, and the people of Sham saw the hilal, and Muawiyah himself saw the hilal, and therefore the people in Sham began Ramadan on which day? Friday, on Friday. But in the middle of the month, I came back to Medina. I arrived back in Medina, and I met Abdullah ibn Abbas, the famous companion of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abdullah ibn Abbas asked me, مَتَى رَأَيْتُمُ الْهِلَالِ? When did you see the hilal while you were in Sham? So I replied and I said, رَأَيْنَاهُ لَيْلَةَ الْجُمُعَةِ. We saw it on Thursday night. So Abdullah ibn Abbas asked me, أَنْتَ رَأَيْتَهُ? You saw it? So Qurayb says, I said, نعم, yes, وَرَآهُ النَّاسُ وَصَامُوا وَصَامَ مُعَاوِيَةً. I saw it, and people saw it, and they fasted on Friday, and Muawiyah fasted on Friday. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, this great senior Sahabi of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لَكِنَّا رَأَيْنَاهُ لَيْلَةَ السَّبْتِ. But we saw it on Friday night. We saw it on Friday night. فَلَا نَزَالُ نَصُومُ حَتَّى نُكْمِلَ 30 أَوْ نَرَاهَا. So we are going to continue our fasting until we either finish 30 days of Ramadan or we see the hilal of Shawwal. So I said, Qurayb says, I said, أَلَا نَكْتَفِي بِرُؤْيَةِ مُعَاوِيَةِ وَصِيَامِهِ. Aren't you going to go by the sighting of Muawiyah and his fasting? So Abdullah ibn Abbas replied to him and he said, لا هكذا أمرنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. No, this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam commanded us to do. This hadith is mentioned by Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i. Okay, so it's a sound hadith, it's an authentic hadith. So this is one of the proofs of those that say that every region does their own fasting. Okay? Because Abdullah ibn Abbas is saying, no, I'm not going to consider what Muawiyah is doing. He's in a different region, I'm in a different region. And this is not just his personal view. He's saying, هَكَذَا أَمَرَنَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. If he had just said no and stopped there, then we could say, well, this is the view of a companion and we don't have to follow the ijtihad of companions. But when he says this is what was taught by the Prophet ﷺ, then this becomes a hadith marfu'. Okay? But like I said, this is the view of the Shafi'i school. The view of the three other schools is that no, if the hilal is sighted anywhere in the world, then everywhere in the world can follow that sighting. They don't have to do their own regional sighting. The bottom line here, brothers and sisters, is that this is an issue of ikhtilaf. This is an issue of differences in opinion, and this is a legitimate difference of opinion. And even though I might personally feel that the opinion of regional sighting is stronger based on evidence and proof, the other opinion is a legitimate opinion. It is permissible to follow it, as long as it is verified that the hilal was sighted somewhere. Not just a claim. It was sighted somewhere. The rest of the globe can follow that sighting. Okay, based on the view of Ittihad al-Matan. Any questions so far? Yes. Yeah, you should be consistent. That's right. You should be consistent. Question? So the question is, how do you define a region? How do the ulama define a region? They differ about that. They differ about how to define a region. One opinion is anything within a radius of 82 kilometers is one region. Anything outside of that is a different region. That's one opinion. Another opinion is, no, it's not that. It is based on longitudinal differences. So anything within the same longitude, all the way north to all the way south, if in the same longitude, is one region. As far as the width, they say 8 degrees of latitudinal difference. So within 8 degrees latitude difference, anything in that region, longitudinal wise, is one region. You understand? That's one view. Another view is it's based on what we're going to see later, the visibility curves. Anything within the curve is one region. Anything outside of the curve is a different region. We're going to see that in a little bit, inshallah. I'm going to start using the PowerPoint. Any other questions here? Another opinion, by the way, is that every country is its own region. Every country that has its own governor, its own ruler, has its own region, and a separate country is a separate region. There's many different opinions about how to define a region. Yes? For those who follow the view of global sighting, yes, they would have to make up later. Yes. That will show how that was actually done. Prophecy. There was a question here? Yes? Yeah, so the question is that if you follow the view of global sighting, in the old days when the means of communication were very slow, how would people find out? How would people practically follow the view of global sighting? Those days, what they would do is sometimes, like I told Shahzad, is that if they find out in the middle of the month that they started fasting a day late, then after Eid they make up one. After Eid they make up one. And they said that they're excused for that because it took them time to find out. Okay? So that's how they used to do it in the past. There's another question back there. Yes? Abdullah ibn Abbas and Qurayb. Right. Well, I can't say what I think, but I'll tell you that the view of the Shafi'is is that it's irrelevant. What they understand from the hadith of Ibn Abbas, and they have other proofs as well, but because of time I'm not going to go into a detailed analysis of that. Their interpretation is that this establishes that every region does its own sighting, regardless of whether the communication is there or not there. Now let me move on because we have limited time, inshallah ta'ala. There is one question here from the sisters or somebody. Assalamu alaikum. Can you please give evidence for global sighting in terms of specific hadith or historically observed within 100 to 200 years after Hijrah? So, like I mentioned, that what's called Ittihadul Matali' or Wahdatul Matali' or global sighting, question. Global sighting, which is that if the Hilal is sighted, confirmed sighting of the Hilal anywhere in the world, everybody has to follow that. This is the view of 3 out of 4 schools of thought, and it's been there for centuries. What is the basis for this? The basis for this might be difficult for you to understand, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, قُومُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ وَأَفْطِرُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ. Fast when you see it, all of you. قُومُوا, all of you, plural. All of you fast when it is seen. And all of you end your fast when it is seen. Here the Prophet ﷺ is addressing the entire Muslim ummah. And he's not making any distinction between one region or another region. So based on this, the Hanafis and the Malikis and the Hanbalis, they say that if it is cited, all of us fast. Regardless of where it's cited, if it is cited and established that it's cited, all of us fast. And if it's not cited, then none of us fast. Okay? So this is a textual evidence, but they also have other proofs. They have rational arguments. Both sides have rational arguments. So I provided one textual proof for the other opinions. So I'll just limit myself to one textual proof for this side as well. So both sides have a hadith that they are using and also rational arguments that they are using. So this is a legitimate difference of opinion because it's within the 4 schools of thought. I have some other questions here from the sisters as well. So let me just see if here. This has to do with fasting, so we'll delay this until the next hour. This next question has nothing to do with Ramadan or fasting. And then this third one. Please limit your questions to the topics at hand, inshallah. The next issue that I wanted to discuss is the science of moon sighting. Before we start this discussion, I want to mention a disclaimer. I'm not an astronomer. This is not my field of expertise. But what I'm going to be sharing with you is basics that I have learned from friends who are in this field. I'm a biochemist by expertise. But that's what my degree is in, not an astronomer. But I have learned these things from my teachers who either themselves are experts in this field or they are ulama who have consulted experts in this field. And these are basic things. These are not, you can even find them yourself on Google if you try to read a few articles about this. Okay? The reason why I want to discuss this issue is because you know that there are different opinions out there about moon sighting. There's different fatwa out there about moon sighting. And if we're going to make a choice about which fatwa we're going to use, we need to have some basic knowledge of fiqh as well as science. in order to make an educated choice, in order to make an educated, informed choice about which fatwa to follow. So I wanted to share with you some basics about the science of moon sighting. Now, to start out with, some basics, some very basic things that hopefully all of us already know. This will be review, inshallah. In our solar system, we have these three celestial bodies. We have the sun, we have the moon, and we have the earth. The moon goes around the earth like this. If you're looking at it from the top, if this is the earth, this is the moon, it goes around the earth in a counterclockwise fashion. Around like this. Okay, you're looking at it from the top of the globe. Okay? The moon goes around the earth in a counterclockwise fashion. And as a result of that, we have the lunar months. Okay? So when the moon goes around the earth a full turn, what do we have? A month ends and a new month begins. One cycle around the earth ends one lunar month. Okay, as it is going around the earth, we have the different phases of the moon that this clock sometimes shows us. Right? This circle. So it starts out at the beginning of the month with a crescent. And then as it continues its journey around the earth, this crescent becomes thicker, 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 till it becomes a half moon. And then it becomes a full moon. And then it begins to wane. It becomes a half moon again. Then a crescent in the other direction until it completely disappears. Right? So this is what happens to the moon, and we can see it in the sky as the lunar month progresses. Starts out with a crescent, then waxes until it becomes full moon, and then wanes until it becomes another crescent and disappears at the end of the month. The earth also goes around the sun. The earth also goes around the sun. And as the earth goes around the sun, we have, when a complete cycle is done around the sun, what do we have? A solar year. Okay, a solar year. And as the sun is going around throughout the year, we have the changes in seasons. Okay, from fall to winter to spring to summer. Okay? Now, we also know that the earth rotates in its orbit. It rotates in its orbit. And as it rotates in its orbit, we see another phenomenon. We see the sun rising and the sun setting. Okay? The sun rises where? In the east, and sets where? In the west. Okay. Can the sun rise from the west? Until the end of times? Doesn't happen, right? Do we know that for sure, that the sun rises from the east, or it's something that's probable? Sure, we know that for sure. Okay? The time that the sun rises from the east, can we compute that? Can we calculate the time of sunrise? Can we compute that accurately? Or is probabilistic accurate? 100% accuracy. No differences in opinion. And that's why on the prayer charts, the sunrise time, you won't find any differences in sunrise time, except, of course, based on geographical locations, because the sun rises at different times at different places around the earth. But in one place, sunrise time, no two scientists would disagree what time sun rises and what time the sun sets also. Right? The time of sunset also, no disagreement. This is something that can be computed with 100% accuracy. So this is what is called definitive knowledge. Definitive or qat'i knowledge. When we can know something for sure, without a doubt. Okay? The opposite of definitive is probabilistic, non-definitive, probabilistic. So, for example, what time is sunset today? Is that definitive or non-definitive? Definitive. But what time is Arsalan going to lead Salat al-Maghrib in Plano Masjid today? Maybe 5 minutes after Adhan, maybe 6 minutes after Adhan, maybe 7 minutes after Adhan. Right? You've prayed here, you've seen that. You can't say definitively 5 minutes, even though it says that on the chart. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 7. Right? That's probabilistic. That's non-definitive. Okay? So keep this concept of definitive and non-definitive in mind as we go forward, insha'Allah ta'ala. Now, you've heard this term before, some of you, the birth of the moon. What is this birth of the moon? Well, what happens is this. I'm going to erase this properly. So what happens is if we consider that the sun is over here somewhere, shining from the left to the right. And we have the moon here. We have the earth over here. And we're looking at it from the top. So this is the North Pole. Okay? When the moon is between the sun and the earth, almost in between, not exactly, but almost aligned completely. This side of the moon is going to be bright, and this side of the moon is going to be dark. Similarly, on the earth, we're going to have nighttime on this side, and daytime on that side, correct? Now, if you are over here, or over here, what's happening? When you're here, what's happening? What phenomenon do you see in the sky? Sun rising or sun setting, right? Since the earth rotates in a counterclockwise fashion, this way, then Maghrib is happening where? Over here, right? That's where Maghrib is happening. Sun is setting there. So over here, are you going to see the moon? You're not going to see the moon because the dark side of the moon is facing you. The bright side of the moon is facing the sun. So when you look at the sky, you will not see anything. All right? Now, the moon goes around the earth in what fashion? Counterclockwise fashion, like this. So after some time, the moon will be over here. And now, what's going to happen is, again, it's going to have dark side and a bright side. Dark side and a bright side. But something different is going to happen. I'm going to illustrate that in a different diagram. Let's say that this is the moon now, looking at it from the top. And the sun is over here. The earth is over here. So the sun is over here, going to make this side bright. This side is going to be dark. But since the earth is over here, you're going to see a part of this and part of this. This part right here, is it bright or dark? Bright. And that is what is the crescent, the new hilal. When the moon moves from being aligned between the sun and the earth, it moves, a crescent appears. It is the light of the sun that is reflecting off of the moon and becoming visible to you here when Maghrib comes in. Okay, so this is what is happening, and that's what we call is the birth of the new moon, is when the moon moves from here, when basically it's here. When it's here, when it's completely aligned between the earth and the sun, that is what we call a lunar conjunction. A lunar conjunction, or what's called the astronomical new moon. So once again, the astronomical new moon is defined as when the sun, the moon, and the earth are aligned in a straight line. Okay, yes? No, see, these are 3D objects, right? So in space, these 3D objects, when they are aligned in one line, that is when the new moon happens. Huh? No, it's the astronomical new moon is defined when they are aligned. Not when it moves. When they are aligned. Yes. So when they are aligned, are we going to see any hilal? No. The hilal is going to become visible once it moves. Right? And that is a very key point that we have to understand. When we have the astronomical new moon, there is no hilal. The hilal can only appear after it has moved from that point. Okay? Yes? We're looking at the center of the moon and the center of the earth. They are aligned. Okay. Now, next issue here is, if you understand this, then the next issue is, there's a word in the Arabic language for moon. It's qamar. And there's another word in the Arabic language that's also translated sometimes as moon, and that is hilal. But qamar and hilal are two different things. Qamar is the celestial body that exists in the sky. The qamar is always there, isn't it? The qamar is always there. A hilal is when the cusp of the moon becomes visible. When the cusp of the moon becomes visible. That is called the hilal. Is the hilal always there? No. It's there sometimes, it's not there sometimes. And then there is another word for a new moon, which is muhaq in the Arabic language. The word muhaq is used for when the moon is basically a new moon, astronomical new moon. That's called a muhaq. So, a hilal comes into existence sometime after the astronomical new moon. Sometime after the birth of the moon is when the hilal comes into existence. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, the next issue is, when can we see the hilal? Well, the time when we can see the hilal, how much, in other words, how much does the moon have to moon out of this straight line for us to see the hilal? Does it happen as soon as it moves? The answer is no. There was a astronomer by the name of Don John, the 1930s, scientist, who discovered that it takes some time for the hilal to become, for hilal to appear, basically. Not just become visible, for it to appear. And he calculated that, and his discovery was that it happens when the angle between the earth, the sun, and the moon, this angle right here is 7 degrees or more. Okay? That angle has to be at least 7 degrees for the hilal to exist, to come into existence. Okay? Now, why doesn't it exist before that? Well, what Don John said is that before 7 degrees, there's not enough light that is being reflected from the moon to reach the earth. You see, in order for us to see light, we either have to be very close to it, or it has to be intense enough to reach us. If I light a bulb here, and the bulb is very dim, and if you are all the way out there in the rotunda, you won't see it. But if I increase the intensity of the light, at some point you will see it. Why won't you see it when it's dim? The light is there, but it's not intense enough to reach where you are. Okay? So before 7 degrees, there's not enough light reflecting off of the surface of the moon in the direction of the earth for it to reach all the way to the earth. There needs to be more of an angle, more light reflecting for it to reach the earth. So the bottom line is, as Don John discovered, that before 7 degrees, there is no hilal. There is no hilal. Because hilal, again, is defined as that part of the moon, the cusp of the moon, that is visible to the people on the earth. Now, after 7 degrees, is it going to be visible to everyone on the earth? The answer is no. Because even after 7 degrees, there are variables that affect the visibility of the hilal. So it depends on certain variable factors. For example, how clear is the sky? How powerful is the optical instrument that I'm using to sight the hilal? It may not be visible to the naked eye. It may be visible to a binocular. It may not be visible to a binocular. It may be visible through telescope. It may not be visible through a conventional telescope. It may be visible through a non-conventional telescope. So it depends on the power of the eyesight. It may be visible to me. It may not be visible to you because my eyesight is stronger than yours. Okay? So it depends on that. It depends on light pollution. How much light there is in the sky. How much light there is in the earth around me. It depends on humidity. How humid is the atmosphere? Or how dry is the atmosphere? It depends on altitude. Where I am I on the ground floor, first floor, 10th floor, 20th floor? Okay? Am I on a mountain? Am I on sea level? A lot of different factors affect the actual visibility of the hilal. But at 7 degrees is the lowest time when the hilal actually exists. in the sky according to Don John. Now, is Don John's discovery contested by anybody? The answer is yes. There are other scientists who disagree. Okay? So others have said, for example, 6.5. There are some who have said 6. And there are some who have even said 5.5, but that's very, very contested. Nobody said less than 5.5. Okay? So the majority, it seems until today, follow the Don John limit. 7 degrees is the minimum angle at which it becomes visible. Okay? But 7, 6.5, this is now not definitive, this is probabilistic. But before 5.5, it cannot be seen. There is no hilal there to see. Okay? Now, let's look at some of these curves that you have seen before. And let's try to see what's going on in them. You see here, this is called a visibility curve. This is called a visibility curve. And there's different colors here. So you see red, purple, green, different shades of green, yellow, orange. And there is a large area that's not colored. So what do these different colors mean? The red, actually they are defined at the bottom of the screen, but it may be hard for you to read. The red is the region where the moon sets before the sunset. The moon sets before the sunset. If the moon has set before the sunset, first of all, the time when the moon sets and the time when the moon rises, is that definitive knowledge or probabilistic knowledge? Definitive. We know what time the moon rises and what time the moon sets, and where it rises and where it sets. Where does the moon rise, by the way? East. Rises in the, just like the sun, because the earth is going in a counterclockwise fashion. The same thing, the same phenomenon. The moon also rises in the east and sets in the west, just like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That's definitive. Where it rises is definitive. What time it rises and sets is definitive. Okay? So the red zone shows that the moon sets before the sunset. If the moon has set before the sunset, can the hilal be sighted after Maghrib? No. Impossible. Definitive or probabilistic? Definitive. There is no hilal, it's below the horizon. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, purple. Purple is where the moon is born after sunset. You see the red color? Yeah. Yeah, the top right is red. The bottom right is purple. Yeah. Bottom right is purple. So the purple region is where the moon is born after the sunset. The moon is born after the sunset. Okay, what does that mean? That means basically that the person is, for example, in this region somewhere. Okay, the sun has already set, and that's when the moon, as it's moving down this way, it becomes aligned. So the moon is born after this region has already passed the sunset time. Now, if the moon is born after sunset, can it be seen? Huh? I can't hear you. Maybe. Can it be seen? No, absolutely not. The moon is born after sunset. It cannot be seen. No, not before or after. I said the red was the moon sets before sunset. The purple is the moon is born after the sunset. Cannot be seen. Both of these, it's impossible to see it, and this is not probabilistic. This is unequivocal, definitive. Okay? Now, any questions about red or purple? Okay, let's move on to green. Green. Green is the zone that is easily visible. The left parabola, the leftmost region, the green region, that is easily visible. Why is it easily visible? Because, I'll come to that in a second, but see my cursor? Okay. So, what's happening here is that this area that is not colored, this whole area that's not colored, is below the Donjon limit. So this whole region is below 7 degrees. What did I say about below 7 degrees? Cannot be seen. There is no hilal there. Okay. What if we say, well, Donjon is wrong, we're going to go with 6.5? Well, that means that this parabola is going to shift slightly to the right. Just slightly to the right. It's still not going to touch Philly. Okay? All right. Now, so what is this orange region? Orange region is what is visible with convention. Not visible. Orange is not visible with conventional telescopes. Orange is only visible with non-conventional telescopes. Yellow is visible with conventional telescopes, not visible to the naked eye. This green right here is visible to the unaided eye after found with optical aid. So you need the help of binoculars to find the hilal, but then when you remove the binoculars, it's still visible. Okay? And then the next green is visible under perfect atmospheric conditions. And then the next green is visible easily to the unaided eye. Okay? So as you move westward, you see that it becomes easier and easier to sight the hilal. Why is that? Because you see these squiggly lines that are coming down? Squiggly line, this one, this one. This shows you how many hours has it been since the birth of the moon. Okay? For example, this is 5 hours. This is 6. This is 7. This is 8. This is 10. 10 hours after the birth of the moon. Then there's 11, 12, and 13, 14, and 15. So since, as you get westward, what's happening to the moon? It's becoming older. It's becoming older. It's also becoming thicker. It's also becoming bigger. What do I mean by bigger? When the moon is very, very new, when the hilal is very new, it's just like this. As time passes by, it becomes bigger. Bigger. Okay? It becomes bigger as time passes by. It becomes thicker. It becomes brighter. It becomes higher. Higher meaning you see it higher up in the horizon after sunsets. And it also stays there for a longer time. It stays there for a longer time. After sunset, it's going to take an hour, 2 hours for the moon to set. But when it's very, very new, in the earlier hours, like over here, for example, it's going to set maybe 10 minutes after sunset, or 15 minutes, or 20 minutes after sunset, which means it's going to be very low in the sky. Now you've seen the horizon, the western horizon at the time of sunset, right? It's very bright. How are you going to see such a thin, small, faint hilal so close to the horizon at that time? It's more difficult. But the higher it is, the thicker it is, the brighter it is, the easier it is to sight it, and that's why they build these, they make these curves to show that it's easily visible here, but not easily visible here, and so on. Okay? So this is what's going to happen on the 15th of May. On the 15th of May. This is the visibility chart of the 15th of May. Is it possible to sight it in Riyadh? Look at it. Is it possible to sight it in Riyadh? Probable? Impossible. Definitively? Definitively, it's in the red. It's in the red, right? Which means what? What does red mean again? No, what does red mean? The moon, where's the moon? The moon sets before the sunset, right? So at sunset there is no moon there. Okay. What about in Egypt? Is it going to be sighted in Egypt? Is it sightable in Egypt? No. Possible. It's way out there. What about Europe? Possible to sight it in Europe? Impossible. There is no moon there at sunset. It's below the horizon. Okay. What about North America? Is it possible to sight it in North America? It's not. What's the orange again? What's the orange? It's not visible with conventional telescopes even. It's not even visible with conventional telescopes, let alone to the naked eye. Okay? So it is impossible to sight the hilal anywhere in North America on the 15th of May. Let's go to the 16th of May. Is it easily visible in North America on the 16th of May? Yeah. But what's going to happen is you're going to have people, they're going to come and say, oh, this looks so big. We made a mistake. Now you understand why it's going to look so big. We did not make a mistake. It was not there. It's not possible to sight it even with conventional telescopes in Texas or even in California. Is the moon there? The qamar is there. The qamar is there, but the hilal is not there. The angle is less than 7 degrees. Has the moon been born? Yes, it's been born, but it cannot be seen. Okay? And what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Don't fast until the moon is born? No. Don't fast until you see the hilal. Okay? One last thing, and then I'll open it up for your questions, inshallah. So, one last thing that I want you to observe. As we move westward, does the hilal become more easily visible or more difficult? More easily, okay? So let's say that somebody in the east says that we have sighted the hilal. Let's say that someone in Egypt says that the hilal was sighted. Then in Morocco, don't you think it would be sighted as well? What about then in Brazil and Chile? It would be more visible, right? If Egypt says that we have sighted the hilal, but Morocco doesn't see it, and Mauritania doesn't see it, and Brazil doesn't see it, and Chile doesn't see it, what does that tell us about the report from Egypt? It's unreliable. It's unreliable. If you want to give them the husn al-dhann, we would say they must have seen something, but it was not the hilal. They must have seen something, but it was not the hilal. Because there's so many things in the sky. There's satellites, there's planes, there's clouds. You know, there's so many things in the sky. There's birds, right? So, Wallahu ta'ala alam, wa sallallahu wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Any questions now, inshallah, about the fiqh of moon sighting or the science of moon sighting? Yes. If there's a report that comes from one of those small islands that they sighted the hilal, then based on the global sighting criteria, yes, one can follow that report. But what we have agreed to do here in Collin County is that we are not going to look beyond the west coast of North America. And the reason is because we don't have reliable contacts in those islands. Okay? The report is not enough. It has to be coming from a reliable source, as we explained earlier. So we are going to limit ourselves to the west coast of North America. Has to be a Muslim. Yes, Shaukat. So the question is that Hawaii is falling in the green. I think Hawaii is in the orange, right? Orange, right? I think Hawaii is in the orange, not in the green. But supposing that Hawaii was in the green, and if somebody cites it in Hawaii, according to the global citing criteria, you would have to follow that citing in the United States. But once again, like I said, that the criteria that the Collin County Masajid have agreed on is not to go beyond the west coast to make it convenient for the people here. Otherwise, we have to wait to get reports from Hawaii, which makes it extremely difficult. That's number one. Number two, that the global sighting criteria also requires that the moon is sighted at a place which shares at least part of the night with the other regions. At least part of the night has to be shared between that region and the other regions, for the other regions to be required to follow the sighting of that region. Does that help? Yes. No. If it is, first of all, if it's visible in the Far East, will it be visible to us? It has to be. If we don't see it anywhere in North America, and we have this in front of us as well, these visibility curves, then we can ascertain that the report that came from the Far East is unreliable. That's correct. But the reason why the Collin County Masajid have expanded from regional to global is, number one, because it is a valid fiqh opinion to follow, and number two, because it allows us to take reports from South America. Okay? Because in South America, you see how the curves are. South America, the moon becomes visible sometimes when it's not visible in North America. Okay? Sometimes it becomes visible in Chile before. In fact, not sometimes, always, is going to be sighted in Chile before it's sighted in Texas or New Mexico or Arizona or California, correct? Because it's east of us. So by expanding our region to include South America, it helps us make a decision faster. Okay? And it makes life easier for the people. If we restrict ourselves to North America only, then we have to always wait for California, which is, 2 hours after us, which makes it a little difficult for the people. So expanding it to include South America makes life easier for the people, and it is still within the legitimate opinions of the 4 schools of thought. This is the reasoning why we have included outside of North America, with one condition, that it has to be a verified sighting. It cannot contradict known astronomical data. Okay, Wallahu alam. Yes. 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 Well, the sky is not going to be clouded all over North America. It's going to be clouded in Texas, but it's going to be clear in California. It's going to be clear somewhere else. See? So we're going to take reports from other parts of the country as well. Allahu ta'ala alam. Let's take a break here, inshaAllah ta'ala. We'll resume in about 10 minutes. Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allah, let me try to get to some of these questions that were sent to me before we start the next session. There was one question that said, Salam, actually local sighting does take into account of South America, the whole landmass, crescentwatch.org. Crescentwatch.org follows global sighting. Since 2010, Crescent Watch changed their criteria from local sighting to global sighting. And that is when they started to look at South America. Before that, they would not look at South America. They were only restricted to North America. But in 2010, they issued a statement. Imam Zayd issued a statement. Then Crescent Watch also issued a statement saying that they are expanding their horizon to from local to global. They are going to start taking reports from South America. This happened in 2010 or 2011, and it's there on the internet. If you'd like me to share the declaration with you, just send me an email. I would be happy to do that, inshallah. The other question is, if the calculations are reliable now, is it necessary to sight the moon? Well, first of all, calculations are not reliable now. Calculations were reliable back then as well. Positional astronomy is not something new. Even people at the time of the Prophet ﷺ computed these things. It's well known that the Jews of Arabia used to intercalate their calendars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chastises them in the Quran for doing that. You know, they used to play with the calendar because they didn't like the fact that their lunar months would shift around the year. And sometimes the month would have summer and other times it would have winter. You know, what we experience with our lunar month. They also used to experience that with their lunar month. They didn't like that. So they used computations to play with their lunar calendars. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chastises the Arabs and the Jews for doing that in the Quran. The computations were reliable at that time as well, especially after the time of the Prophet ﷺ in the 4th, 5th, 6th century Hijri. We have writings from the ulama of those times that have explained positional astronomy just like astronomers explain it today. So the distance between the sun and the moon, between the moon and the earth, the circumference of the moon, the circumference of the earth, the angles that we talked about, these phenomena were very well known to people, certain people at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Not everybody knew them, just like not everybody knew how to read or write, but some companions knew how to read or write. In that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, نَحْنُ أُمَّةٌ أُمِّيَّةٌ لَا نَكْتُبُ وَلَا نَحْسُبُ. We are an unlettered people that don't write or compute. We know for a fact that there were companions who wrote. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu knew how to read and write. Other companions knew how to read and write. In fact, there were even mushrikeen that knew how to read and write. And the Prophet ﷺ at the Battle of Badr had made an agreement that if the captives of war could teach the Muslims how to read and write, they would be let free. Which shows that not everybody was illiterate. But as a whole, the Arabs were an illiterate nation. But there were exceptions. Similarly, when it came to computation, there were exceptions. There were people who knew how to compute. So to say that now we can compute reliably and at that time we couldn't, I don't agree with that. And even if we suppose that that is the case, the Prophet ﷺ, the language that he used, as I mentioned earlier, was very specific. And he could have used non-specific words that would have allowed us to use computation, but he didn't use those words. He insisted on the use of ru'ya, on the use of sighting, and therefore we have no choice but to do that. We can help computations, we can use computations to help us verify a claim of sighting, which we will do inshallah ta'ala, but we cannot solely start the month of Ramadan and end on calculations because the text of the Prophet ﷺ does not allow us to do that. Allahu ta'ala. Are there any other questions related to what we covered so far, inshallah? Yes. Go ahead. Which website? You mean the visibility curves? The reference to the visibility curves? So there are many websites that have visibility curves. One website is crescentwatch.org. It's a very similar curve. It's not the exact same one, but it's a similar one. The one that I had, I forgot the URL for it right now. It's very similar. If you go to crescentwatch.org, you will see a very similar curve with the legend at the bottom, inshallah. Any other question? You had a second question? Yes? So the position of Collin County is very clear. The Collin County Masajid have decided to start and end the month of Ramadan based on a verified sighting of the Hilal from anywhere in the world. And if a report comes from Saudi Arabia that the Hilal was sighted, we would reject that report because it is impossible for the Hilal to be sighted there. So we would have accepted that report if it did not contradict definitive scientific data. Since in this case it would contradict it, therefore we would reject that report, especially when it's not seen here. Because like we said, this is also definitive, that if it is seen in the east, it must be seen. Allahu A'lam. Yes? Yes, that's right. Yes, they're still doing it. Yeah, they still do that. The Jews still do that. Correct. Any other questions? Tips for looking for the Hilal. So usually on the last day of Sha'ban, the last day of Ramadan, we have a group of people that go to sight the Hilal. So if you're interested, you can join that group and you will learn how to look and where to look and talk to Brother Nafis, inshallah, so that when usually he takes that group, so you can be part of that group and you can learn, inshallah. And I encourage people to participate in the sunnah of sighting the Hilal from time to time. Something, wonderful to do. It's wonderful to see the appearance of the Hilal on the sky. It is sunnah to look for it. It's sunnah to make dua when that happens. It's very exciting. And sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us in the Quran to look for His signs in the universe. So, but I tell you this time, you're not going to see anything. For Ramadan, you're not going to see anything. So, but we should still go and to look for it. Allah ta'ala. The group will do that here. Last question about moon sighting, because we have to cover other topics. The last question about moon sighting. So brothers, just let me see if there's somebody else who didn't get a chance. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead. No. So naturally, as I mentioned in the case of Abdullah ibn Abbas and Qurayb, when they started their fast on different days, right? This was happening very commonly in the history of the Muslim Ummah, that different regions would be starting their months at different times based on their sighting that they did in their regions. And so there would be parts of the world that have, for example, Arafah on one day, and another part of the world that has Arafah on a different day. And as long as people go out and sight the Hilal, and based on that they do their month, their fasting, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them the reward of fasting on those days. Same thing with Ashura and the other days on which it is virtuous to fast. Inshallah, if I have time at the end, I will share another hadith with you about moon sighting. But because of time, I want to move on and talk about fiqh of fasting. If I have time, please remind me at the end, share with you that another hadith about moon sighting that's very, very interesting that almost nobody talks about. All right, the fiqh of fasting. Once again, throughout this presentation, if you have any questions that you would like to submit electronically, you can send a text to the number that is on the board. Inshallah. First of all, what is the ruling of fasting the month of Ramadan? Is it fard, or mustahab, or mubah, or makruh, or haram? Is it an obligation, or recommendation, or optional, or disliked, or unlawful? What is it? Fard. Okay, fard. If someone denies that it is fard to fast the month of Ramadan, if someone denies, I don't believe that it's fard to fast the month of Ramadan, that is kufr. That is very serious. That takes the person outside of the fold of Islam. And the reason is because this is something that is ma'loom min ad-deen bil-darura. That this is something that is necessarily known by all Muslims. Even a child knows that. Because the evidence for it is so overwhelming from the Quran and the First of all, in the Quran, does Allah tell us that fasting the month of Ramadan is an obligation? Where does He tell us? What's the ayah? يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. O you who believe, fasting has been made mandatory upon you as it was made mandatory on those who came before you so that you may attain taqwa. Does this ayah tell me that it's mandatory for me to fast the month of Ramadan? No. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام. O you who believe, fasting has been made mandatory upon you. Someone can say, I'll fast the month of December. Fasting has been made mandatory upon you. It doesn't say anything about Ramadan. It doesn't establish that fasting is Ramadan. Fard. Fasting is fard. That's not the ayah. Is there another ayah? شهر رمضان what? شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The month of Ramadan is when the Quran was revealed. That doesn't tell me that I have to fast it. But you're close. هدى للناس وبينات هدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه. This is where it is. Whoever witnesses the month of Ramadan must fast it. فمن شهد منكم الشهر. Which shahr? شهر Ramadan. Whoever among you witnesses the month, i.e. month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed, must fast it. This is the ayah that establishes that we have to fast the month of Ramadan. And then there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, like which one that you know, famous one, in which the Prophet ﷺ told us we have to fast the month of Ramadan. Okay, yes, so the one about the moon sighting that we mentioned before, but something that's even more commonly known. No, that's telling you the reward of fasting the month. That's telling you that you get a lot of reward for fasting the month. It doesn't say you have to fast the month. There's a lot of reward for fasting on the day of Arafah. Does that mean you have to fast on it? No. Okay? Hadith of Jibreel. You guys know the hadith of Jibreel? Jibreel came and asked questions. Said, أخبرني عن الإسلام. Tell me Islam. The Prophet ﷺ told him, Islam is this and fasting the month on. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ. that Islam is founded on 5 things. And among them he said, Sawm Ramadan, and so on. So there is unanimous agreement of all the ulama that fasting the month of Ramadan is fard. Why am I emphasizing this? Because there are people who claim to be Muslim who say we don't have to fast the month of Ramadan. Very serious. Takes them outside the fold of Islam. Now, somebody who agrees that they have to fast the month of Ramadan, but they don't, out of negligence, out of carelessness, is that person stepping out of Islam? Not kufr, but it is a major sin. Not just a minor sin, a major sin. Okay? So this is something very serious. To deliberately not fast on a day of Ramadan without an excuse, even one day, is a major sin that a person has to do tawbah for. A person has to repent for. Now, there are 2 pillars of fasting. For a fasting to be valid, there are 2 arkan that have to be fulfilled, 2 pillars of fast, without which a fast is not valid. Number 1 is to avoid the things that break the fast. Okay? And number 2 is to have the intention to fast. To have the intention to fast. So without having the intention to fast Ramadan, one does not get a valid fast. But when does that intention have to be made? Does it have to be made every day of Ramadan? Or can one make one intention at the beginning of the month and that suffices for the entire month? Now pause here. Throughout the rest of the discussion, I'm going to be mentioning things on which there's different opinions. Okay? Things on which there are different opinions. So because we have a diverse group here, okay, some of you might be Hanafi, some of you might be Shafi'i, some of you might follow various schools of thought. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the different opinions. My intent is not to confuse you. My intent is to tell you the opinion of the scholars that you follow. So if you hear your madhab, you latch on to that. Okay? My intent is also to tell you the spectrum of different opinions so that it's best to follow the safer opinion, but if it is very difficult to follow one opinion, the other opinion is also a legitimate opinion to follow. I'm going to give you the different opinions, the spectrum with that in, so that if one opinion poses undue hardship, it is permissible for you to follow a different opinion, but in general, it is better to follow the safest opinion, as long as it's not posing undue hardship on you. Okay? So this issue of whether the intention has to be made every night, or can it be just made at the beginning of the month of Ramadan, is an issue of disagreement. The Maliki school is the only school that says that you can make it at the beginning of the month for the entire month. But the Hanafi school, the Shafi'i school, and the Hanbali school, 3 schools out of 4, they say that it has to be made daily, every day. Okay? When does it have to be made? According to the Shafi'is and Hanbalis, the intention has to be made in the nighttime, between sunset and dawn. Between sunset and dawn, sometime between sunset and dawn. But according to the Hanafi school, it has to be made before midday. Before midday. Okay? The intention is in the heart. It can be pronounced with the tongue, but what matters is what's in the heart of the person. It does not have to be pronounced with the tongue, though it can be pronounced with the tongue as well. So as long as I know in my heart that I am fasting tomorrow as a fast of Ramadan, then that suffices. I know that I don't have to pronounce the intent. Now the next thing is, who is required to fast? Not everybody is required to fast. Who is required to fast? So number 1, person has to be adult. above the age of puberty. So people who are below the age of puberty, they don't have to fast. Okay? But people who are above the age of puberty, they have to fast. So what that means is that if a girl, let's say if a girl has her menses when she is 9 years old, according to the lunar calendar, she has her menses when she's 9 years old, she has to start fasting. But usually that doesn't happen. Start a little bit later, okay? So whenever she has her menses, as long as she's above the age of 9, she now becomes responsible to fast. It's obligatory on her to fast. Similarly with the boy, boy has his first wet dream. After that, he has hit puberty. He has to fast. Before that, they don't have to fast. Boy or girl don't have to fast before the age of puberty. But after the age of 7, they should be encouraged to develop a habit of fasting. Also, a person has to be sane. If a person is not sane, they do not fast. Okay? If a person is not sane, then they do not have to fast. Person has to be healthy. So a person who is not healthy, who is sick, doesn't have to fast, but they have to make it up later. Unless they are in a terminal illness, in that case, they will never get better, so they do not fast. Instead, they pay fidya for every day, and we'll talk about fidya in a little bit, inshallah. Also, a person has to be resident, so travelers don't have to fast. Okay? They make up their fast later. But how do we define travel? We'll talk about that a little bit, inshallah. A person has to be capable of fasting. Somebody who's not capable of fasting don't have to fast. Instead, they pay fidya. We'll talk about later. Also, women who are in their menses, who are currently in their menses, they don't fast. They cannot fast. It's not permissible for them to fast. Do they have to make it up later? Yes, they do. They have to make it up later. Same thing with women who are in postnatal bleeding. Now, who is excused from fasting? Who is excused from fasting? Number one, those people for whom fasting is life-threatening. Okay? So for someone for whom fasting is life-threatening, they have to break their fast. And instead, they have to make it up later, and there's no fidya. They just make it up later. Now, this is for someone who it's life-threatening to fast. Someone who is ill, where the illness will worsen because of fasting. It's permissible for them to break their fast, and they have to make it up later, and there's no fidya required to be paid. Okay? Number 3, people who are not ill, but they fear they will become ill if they fast. They're not ill, but they fear that they will become ill if they fast. Why do they fear that? Because of prior experience, or because the doctor has told them. Okay? So for them, what do? There's 2 different opinions. The stricter opinion is the Shafi'i. The Shafi'i opinion is that they have to fast. If they get sick, then they get the option to break their fast. But just because they fear an illness doesn't allow them to skip the fast. This is the Shafi'i view. But the majority view, the view of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, and Ahmad, is that a person who fears an illness may omit the fast, and instead they make it up later when they no longer fear to be ill. They make it up at that time. Okay, next. Those for whom hunger or thirst becomes unbearable. Fasting and hunger and thirst becomes unbearable. I'm fainting, I cannot, just completely, not difficult, difficult for many people. Okay? Unbearable. Okay? For them, according to all the 4 schools of thought, it's permissible that they may break their fast, and they have to make it up later. There's no fidya that they have to pay in that situation. Next, travelers. Travelers have the permission to omit their fast and make it up at a later time. they don't have to pay any fidya. But how do we define travel? According to all the four schools of thought, travel is defined by a certain distance and duration of the journey. If there is a certain amount of distance that you are traveling, that's when you're called a traveler. If you're traveling less than that distance, you're not considered a traveler. And that distance is approximately 81 kilometers or 50 miles. So if your destination where you're going to is 50 miles away or more, then when you leave your city limits, you are considered a traveler. Once you leave the city limits, and your destination is at least 50 miles away, you are considered a traveler. The next thing is duration. Once you arrive at your destination, how long are you going to stay there? If you're staying there for a short period of time, then you're a traveler. But if you're staying there for a long period of time, you're not a traveler. You're a resident when you arrive there. On the way there, you're a traveler. When you arrive there, now you're a resident. So how do you define short duration and long duration? This again is a matter of differences in opinion. Okay, so according to the Hanafi school, less than 15 days is a short duration. Meaning that if you're there for less than 15 days, you are a traveler. But if you're there for 15 days or more, then you become a resident the moment you arrive there. The majority, Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis, they say 4 days. So less than 4 days, you are a traveler. 4 days or more, you are a resident. So this is how travel is defined. Now, according to the Hanafi school and the Maliki school, you are not allowed to break your fast on a journey. You are not allowed to break your fast on a journey. What does that mean? That means that let's say that I'm traveling from Plano to California, San Francisco. Okay? Is that more than 50 miles away? If I leave Plano at 12 p.m., okay, I leave Plano at 12 p.m. At Fajr, can I choose not to fast? No, why not? Because I'm a resident. I'm not a traveler. At 12 p.m. when I leave the city limits of Plano to travel to San Francisco, now do I become a traveler? Yes. Can I break my fast? No. The Hanafi school does not allow you, and the Maliki school does not allow you to break your fast during a journey. But if my departure was before Fajr, okay, if my departure was before Fajr, and then while I'm on the journey, Fajr comes in, do I have to fast? No. Because I am a traveler, and a traveler is allowed to fast. Okay? So this is something important to know if you're Hanafi or Maliki. Shafi'is, they allow you to break your fast if the journey begins before dawn. If the journey begins before dawn, you are allowed to break your fast on a journey, which means what? That let's say that I begin my journey before dawn, okay? And I'm allowed not to fast, but I decide to fast anyway. But then later on, I want to change my mind. I can break my fast. As long as the journey began before Fajr. The Hanbali school is the most lenient in this issue. They say that a traveler may break their fast at any time. At any. The first scenario that we gave, where you're leaving Plano at 12 p.m. to go to California, once you leave the city limits of Plano, you can break your fast. According to the Hanbali school, but not the Hanafi or Maliki school. Okay, any questions about travelers? Yes? So you're talking about based on the Hanafi school, Hanbali school. So based on the Hanbali school, you're saying that I left the city limits of Plano and I broke my fast, right? But then when I get to the airport, the flight's canceled, so I come back to Plano. So the question is, what do I do in that case? I have to make up that days of fasting. To make up that days of fasting, and when I come back to Plano, preferably, not required, but preferably, I should refrain from food and drink until sunset. But I have to make up that days of fasting at a later time. Okay? And I may eat or drink because I'm not fasting on the day. I've already broken my fast. But preferably, I should refrain from food and drink until sunset. In either case, I have to make up the fast at a later time. Would I ask? Okay, so I don't know if I understood your question correctly, but basically let's say that you're flying eastward. Okay, you're flying eastward and the day is going to be very long. In that case, short, it's going to be short. Flying westward, you mean? Okay, so just to make it simple, when you are flying in the airplane, if you decide to fast, which you can, if you decide to fast and you're in the airplane, when do you break your fast? You break your fast when you see the sun setting outside of the airplane window or on the screen. See also on the screen sometimes. But basically, when the sun sets where you are geographically, when the sun sets where you are, that's when you break your fast. You don't break your fast based on your point of origin. You don't break your fast based on your point of destination. You break your fast when the sun sets where you are. Now, it may be that, depending on how you're flying, that it's not going to set for a very long time. It can be a very long day. Okay? So in that case, if you choose to fast, you fast all the way until sun sets. If it becomes unbearable to fast, what do we say? Permissible to break your fast if it's unbearable. Also, you don't have to fast when you're on a journey, as long as we follow the guidelines before. So in that type of a situation, it might be better for the person to take the rukhsah and not fast, make up that fast later on. But if one does decide to fast, then they have to continue to fast until the sun sets, unless it becomes unbearable to complete the fast, in which case, by consensus, they break their fast and they make it up at a later time and there's no fidyah. So if somebody is staying, let's say, in San Francisco for 3 days, let's say, for 3 days, they are a traveler, correct? They're considered a traveler according to all the 4 schools because it's less than 4 days. Okay? For those 3 days, so somebody who is constantly traveling, should they fast or should they not? So, somebody who is traveling, they have the permission not to fast. The question is it better to fast or better not to fast? They have the permission not to fast. The question is it better to fast or is it better not to fast? This is an issue of disagreement among the ulama. Okay? But the majority view is that it is better to fast unless it is very difficult to fast, in which case it's better not to fast. But as long as it doesn't pose hardship on the person, it is better to fast on time rather than making up the fast. Okay? Yes. 50 miles. According to the 4 schools, 50 miles still apply. Still applies. Because even in the old days, you see, even in the old days, there were fast means of transportation and slower means of transportation. People could walk or take a mule or take a camel or take a horse. There were faster horses. So no distinction was made based on the mode of transportation for the travel. One distance was set for everybody. So that continues to apply for our times according to the 4 schools of thought. So there are other opinions outside of the 4 schools which I don't want to go into. Okay? But just keep this basic principle in mind, that it is better to fast on time for someone who's traveling as long as it doesn't pose a hardship on that person. Okay? Let me move on, inshallah ta'ala, and if you have some more questions, we'll try to get to them towards the end. Old people. People who are old, what do? People who are very old, they may break their fast and they do not make up their fast. But do they have to pay fidya? The answer is yes, they have to pay their fidya according to 3 schools. The Hanafi school, the Shafi'i school, and the Hanbali school. But according to the Maliki school, they do not pay fidya. So very old people, they don't fast, they don't make up, they don't pay fidya. Very easy. According to the Maliki school. According to the Maliki school. Huh? That's right. Senile discount. Senior discount. Okay, people who are terminally ill. Same as old people. People who are terminally ill are treated just like old people. So the majority say that they have to pay fidya. They don't fast and they don't make up, but they have to pay fidya. The Maliki school says they do not even have to pay fidya. Now women in their menses and postnatal bleeding, I think I already mentioned that they cannot fast. They cannot fast. Instead they make it up and they don't have to pay any fidya. Pregnant and nursing women. Pregnant and nursing women. Pregnant and nursing women, this is an issue that many people misunderstand. Especially the sisters, to pay attention to this. Pregnant and nursing women have to fast. Pregnant and have to fast if they can. But if fasting will present a danger to their health or to the health of the baby, then they have the option not to fast. But unless that is the case, they have to fast. Are you familiar with any women who fast during their pregnancy? Raise your hand if you know anybody who fast in their pregnancy. A few people, yes? So, it's possible. It's very possible. There are many women who it doesn't pose any danger to. But there are also women that it poses a danger. So you consult your doctor, a reliable doctor. The doctor says for your health it presents a risk, don't fast. But if there's no risk, you go ahead and you try to fast. If it becomes unbearable, then that's a different story. But you make an attempt to fast as long as it doesn't pose a risk. If it poses a risk, then you don't fast. You have to make it up later. That's according to the 4 schools of thought. You have to make it up. You cannot just pay fidya. You have to make it up when it is possible for you to make it up. Okay? Preferably before the next Ramadan. If it's possible to make it up before the next Ramadan, you have to make it up before next Ramadan. If it's not possible, then whenever you are able to make it up. Now, do you have to also pay fidya in addition to making up the fast? According to the Hanafi school, no. No fidya needs to be paid. You only need to make up the fast. But according to the Hanbali school and the Shafi'i school, You don't pay fidya if you are worried about yourself. But you do pay fidya if you are only worried about the child. So if you break your fast as a pregnant woman or a nursing woman because you are worried about the child, not about yourself, you're worried about the child, then in that case, you have to pay fidya in addition to making up the fast. But if you break your fast because you're worried about risk for your own self, then you do not have to pay fidya. This is the Hanbali school and the Shafi'i school. But like I said, the Hanafi school, there's no fidya in any case for pregnant or nursing women who break their fast because they feel that there's a risk either to themselves or to the child. Okay, next issue is making up missed fasts. When do missed fasts have to be made up? It's recommended to make them up immediately, but it's not required. It's recommended to make up the fast immediately. Immediately meaning when? Right after Eid al-Fitr. Right after Eid al-Fitr. But it is not required to do that. It is also recommended to make them up consecutively. But it's not required to do that either. Now, what if somebody delays their makeups until the next Ramadan comes and they do not make up their fasts from the previous Ramadan? They had the opportunity to do that. They don't have a legitimate excuse. They just put it off and they never got to it, and next Ramadan comes. Is there a consequence? According to the Hanafi school, there is no fidya that they have. They are blameworthy for having done that, but there is no fidya. They don't have to pay any fidya. But according to three schools, Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis, according to them, now they have to pay fidya. They have to pay what's called kafara. They have to pay kafara because they delayed it too much without a legitimate excuse. And how much they have to pay, I'm going to come to that when I talk about the amounts for fidya and kafara. Okay. For women who are married, when they're making up their fast, they should seek the permission of their husbands first. Make sure that their husbands are okay with that. If they're not okay with that, they do it at a later time. They should seek the permission of their husbands when they are making up their fast from the month of Ramadan. What if somebody dies and they did not make up their fast? Somebody dies and they did not make up their fast. What does the family do? Is the family supposed to do anything in that situation? Here also there are differences of opinion. So according to the Hanafi school and the Maliki school, the family has to pay fidya from the wealth of the deceased, not their own wealth. The wealth that was left behind by the deceased, they have to take some money from that before it's distributed among the inheritors, and they give it away in the form of fidya. Okay? But this requirement only exists, according to the Hanafis, if the dying person had made a wasiyah to do that. If the dying person had made a wasiyah to do that, only then is the family required to do this, according to the Hanafi school. Okay? If they did not make a wasiyah to do that, then the family is not required to do that. Now, the Shafi'i school and the Hanbali school, they agree with all of this, but they say, however, it is better that the family members, somebody in the family, fast on behalf of the deceased rather than giving fidya. It's better that somebody makes up the fast on behalf of the deceased rather than paying fidya. But this doesn't, the Hanafi school and the Maliki school don't agree with that. They say that fidya is. So this is the difference of opinion about somebody who dies without making up the fast. Now the next issue is, let me just finish and then you'll have opportunity to ask questions. The next issue is, if somebody breaks their fast deliberately, without an excuse, out of negligence, out of practicing, they break their fast deliberately, without a legitimate excuse, what is the consequence? The consequence of that, number one, they have to make up the fast. Everybody agrees with that. Number two, they have to make tawbah. Everybody agrees with that. But now, is there kafara for that? Is there a kafara for that? According to the Hanafis and the Malikis, they have to do kafara regardless of how they broke their fast. Regardless of how they broke their fast, they have to do a kafara. They have to expiate for that. But according to the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, they only have to expiate if the fast was broken by sexual intercourse. Not if the fast was broken by eating or drinking. Okay, but according to the Hanafis and Malikis, even if the fast was broken by eating or drinking, there is expiation. What's the expiation in this case? The expiation is very severe. The expiation is, number one, free a Muslim slave. Slaves don't exist anymore. You go to the next option. The next option is fast 2 consecutive lunar months. Fast 2 consecutive lunar months. And if that's not possible for health reasons, then feed 60 needy people. This is the kafara for breaking 1 day of fasting deliberately by sexual intercourse according to Shafi'is and Hanbalis, and by any means according to the Hanafis and Malikis. But here the Hanafis say this is only when somebody breaks their fast. This doesn't apply if somebody doesn't fast to begin with. Somebody doesn't fast to begin with, they're still sinful. It's a major sin. Have to make tawbah for that. Have to make up that day. But there's no kafara for that. Kafara that we mentioned, according to the Hanafis, is only when somebody starts the day fasting but then breaks. Okay? Is that clear? Any questions about this? Clear, inshallah? The next issue is the fidya amount. What is the amount of fidya? So, the original rule regarding fidya, which almost nobody practices in the United States anymore, but at least we have to know it, okay? Because this is the default. Okay, we'll come to the exceptions, which everybody does, but this is the default. We have to know what the default. The asl is that fidya is given in the form of food, not in the form of food, to be more specific, in the form of grain. Okay? So, how much grain do you give? Different opinions. According to the Hanafis, you give 4.85 pounds of wheat. 4.85 pounds of wheat, or 2.2 kilograms, for every day. Fidya. This is the fidya amount. The Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis, their requirement is different. Their requirement is 2.65 pounds. And it doesn't have to be wheat. It can be any staple that is used in the land where you live. Chickpeas, barley, rice, so on, dates, raisins, whatever is the staple food that is prevalent in the area where you live. You give 2.65 pounds of that, the form of grain, to the poor for every day. This is the Malikis, Shafi'is, and Hanbalis. Now, can it be given in the form of money, or does it have to be given in the form of grain? Here also there are different opinions. The Hanafis are the only ones out of the 4 schools who allow that it be given in the form of money. Okay, and pretty much everyone in the US now follows that Hanafi opinion because it's easier and it's also more beneficial to the poor. Okay, money is more useful to them rather than grain in the United States. So it is permissible to follow this opinion. In fact, there's nothing wrong with following this opinion, but it is the Hanafi view, and therefore since this is the Hanafi view, my suggestion is that we follow the Hanafi requirement of the amount. So the monetary value, we're not going to look at the value of 2.65 pounds of rice. We have to look at the value of 4.85 pounds of wheat. Okay? We calculate that in the form of money, and that is the least amount that must be given in the form of fidya. Okay? So fidya amount is this, and it can be given in the form of money. The ulama in North America generally recommend $10 per day. Generally recommend $10 per day. In my opinion, that's actually too much. Be less than that. But if you do $10, you're safe, inshallah ta'ala. Now the other question related to fidya that comes up is that when does the fidya have to be paid? Can it be paid on the 1st of Ramadan for the entire month? Can it be paid on the 1st of Ramadan for the entire month? The answer is yes, but only according to the Hanafis. The others don't allow that. The others say you cannot pay for the second day on the first day. The day has to come before you can give the fidya. Just like the prayer time has to come before you pray. You cannot pray in advance. Just like that fidya you don't give in advance. You have to give fidya once the day actually comes and you're alive on that day, then you give fidya. But the Hanafi school says no, you don't have to do that. Fidya is different. They say you can give it on the 1st of Ramadan for the entire month of Ramadan. You can do that. The second question also related to this is, can it be delayed? Can it be delayed, or does it have to be paid, for example, by the end of Ramadan? And the answer is that according to the Hanafis and the Shafi'is, it can be delayed. According to the Hanafis and the Shafi'is, it can be delayed. It can be given in Shawwal or Dhul Qa'dah or Dhul Hijjah or Muharram or Safar. It can be delayed to a later time, though it's preferable to give in the month of Ramadan. Okay, I'm going to pause here and see if you have any questions. I have here 2 sections that I have not covered, which have to do with things that break your fast, things that don't break your fast. But I think I would rather deal with that in question answers rather than giving you a list. If you have any questions about fasting, any questions about what breaks your fast, what doesn't break your fast, we can take those now. Allah Ta'ala. I have a few questions here that were sent as text. Let me look at these first. So here, there's a question that says, can we give sadaqah in Ramadan or without Ramadan to close relatives? Yes, we can. And do I have to tell them about sadaqah defiantly, or is it allowed without telling? No, you don't have to tell them. You can give it without telling them that this is sadaqah. Can you please repeat the position of Shafi'is and Hanbalis about fasting as a traveler? So I said that travelers are allowed not to fast, but the Shafi'is and Hanbalis about travelers. So the Shafi'i view is that travelers are allowed to break their fast if the journey began before Fajr. And the Hanbalis say that travelers are allowed to break their fast unconditionally, regardless of when the journey began. Okay? The Shafi'is say that travelers are allowed to break their fast if the journey began before dawn, and the Hanbalis say travelers may break their fast regardless of when the journey began. The next question here is, Assalamu alaikum, what constitutes traveler? I think we answered that. someone who chooses to go on a holiday during Ramadan, would they be allowed to break and make up, or do they need to pay fidya? As long as they fit the definition of traveler that we define, it doesn't matter what the purpose of the trip is, business or pleasure, as long as it's halal. Someone who sets out on a journey to do something haram, they cannot break their fast, they have to fast. But as long as the purpose of the trip is halal, regardless of whether it's business or pleasure, it is, as long as they're considered a traveler, they're permitted to omit their fast and make it up later, although we said that it is better for them to fast unless it poses a hardship. There's no fidya required. Next question is, what do you suggest for those that miss several years of fasting due to reasons like pregnancy, nursing, doctor recommended to fast? It might be a hardship to them to make up all of the fast. According to the view of the 4 schools of thought, they have to make up those days of fasting. You make a schedule for yourself, inshallah ta'ala, you fast. Dawood alayhi salam used to fast every other day. And there are many people in this ummah who fast every other day. The Prophet ﷺ said, this is the best fast, the fast of Dawood, fast every other day. It does not pose an undue hardship on the person. It's difficult. It requires taqwa and iman. But it does not pose an undue hardship on the person. If you cannot do the fast of Dawood, fasting Mondays and Thursdays, fasting 13, 14, 15, there's many people who do that on a regular basis. Allah Ta'ala, you make a schedule for yourself like that with the intention of making up the fasts rather than the intention of doing sunnah fasts, and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala make it easy for you. The next question is, Assalamu alaikum. I do not know how many fasts I had missed over the lifetime. How do I make it up? You make your best judgment. Try to make an estimate to the best of your ability, and you tawakkul ala Allah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for you, and you go forward that way, inshallah ta'ala. Now, questions from the floor. Yes? So first, the question is that can the fidya be sent overseas, or does it have to be given locally? There are many ulama that allow fidya to be sent overseas, although the preference is that it be given locally. Keep that in mind. For fidya, the preference is that it be given locally to needy people who are local. It has to be given to Muslims. It cannot be given to sadaqah can be given to we're encouraged to give charity to non as well as Muslims. But there are certain types of charity that can only be given to Muslims. Zakat is one of them. Fidya is another. Okay? Fidya should be given to needy people locally. And there's plenty of people here. You're talking about DFW or another locality. But there's plenty of people in DFW that are in need, that are Muslims. And we should give to them because nobody else is going to give to them. So, but having said that, it is permissible, according to me, to send it outside, overseas. And in that case, when it's sent overseas, do we give the amount, the value based on the amount based on the value of the poor person's locality or the locality of the one who's giving? It is permissible to use the value of the locality of the poor person. Yes, to use the amount. But it wouldn't be the preferred thing. Allah. The question? Is it permissible to combine intentions when you are making up the fast? So in Shawwal, can I have a combined intention to fast the month of Shawwal as well as making up the fast of the month of Ramadan? Many ulama have allowed that. Allow to have a dual intention. Some don't allow it, but many ulama allow it. However, keep one thing in mind. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about the fasting of Shawwal says, whoever completes the month of Ramadan and follows it up with 6 days of Shawwal has the reward of fasting the entire year. Hadith says, whoever completes the month of Ramadan, then follows it up with the fast of Shawwal, 6 days of Shawwal. So in order to get the reward that he has talked about in that hadith, I have to first complete Ramadan and then do 6 days of Shawwal. Okay? So if I do a dual intention, I don't get that reward unless I finish Ramadan first and then do 6 days of Shawwal. It's permissible to do that, inshallah, to have a dual intention for Shawwal, but to get that reward that he talked about, I have to finish Ramadan first and then do Shawwal after that. Also, if somebody does that, for example, on Arafah, on the day of Arafah, I have a makeup to do from the month of Ramadan. So I fast the day of Arafah with the dual intention of making up and Arafah. It's permissible, and inshallah you get the reward of Arafah as well as the makeup. Okay, because what matters for the day of Arafah is that you spend that day fasting. Okay, so since you spent that day fasting, you get the reward of fasting Arafah. And your intention was to fast also the makeup fast. That's permissible according to of the ulama. Allahu A'lam. Any other questions about fasting? Yeah. For a fard fast? For fard fast, in order for the fast to be valid, I have to intend that I'm fasting what kind of fard I'm fasting. Like Ramadan makeup, for example, I'm fasting Ramadan qada. I have to have that intention for the fast to count as a makeup fast. For voluntary fasts, in order for me to get the reward of fasting Arafah, I have to have the intention of fasting the day of Arafah. If I just fast with the intention of I'm fasting, but I don't say I'm fasting the day of Arafah, I get the reward of a voluntary fast, but I don't get the reward of fasting the day of Arafah. So I have to specify which day I'm fasting in order to get the special reward that is in that days of fast. Does that make sense? Any other questions about fasting? When do you stop eating suhoor? Good question. Yes. So when it comes to eating suhoor, we can eat and drink until the break of dawn. The break of dawn. Fajr time entering. When Fajr time begins, that's when we must stop eating and drinking. If we eat or drink beyond the time of Fajr, let's say that Fajr time, is 5:11 a.m. Okay, 5:11 a.m. I can eat and drink until 5:11 a.m. If I'm eating at 5:12 a.m., fast is invalidated. Okay? So here, some people make some mistakes. Okay? People think that I have to be eating and drinking until 5:11 a.m. That's not true. Okay? The companions, there's a hadith that says that the companions used to stop eating and drinking, and there was enough time between that and the prayer for them to recite something like Surah Qaf, which takes about, at their speed, I'm guessing, at their speed, takes about 10 minutes to recite something like Surah Qaf. Okay? So meaning that the preference is to have some gap, not a large 2-3 hour gap, some gap between the end of suhoor and Fajr time. But is it permissible to eat all the way until 5:11? Yes, it is permissible to do that. But the other misunderstanding that people have is that they think that if the adhan is being called, that they can eat and drink until the end of the adhan. This is completely wrong. Completely wrong. If the adhan is being called on time, then that means you have to stop eating and drinking when? before the adhan. Because the adhan is called after the break of dawn, and the break of dawn is the cutoff line. So to eat and drink while the adhan is going on, you're eating after dawn. Your fast doesn't count. Yeah, early iftar, that's right. Very early iftar. Okay? Now, there is, so I hope that's clear, inshallah. So adhan, if adhan is being called on time, then we stop eating and drinking before the adhan. If the adhan is not being called on time, let's say the adhan is being called early, somebody calls adhan 2 minutes before fajr, then I can eat and drink, because we don't look at the adhan, we look at the time of the adhan. Okay? Is that clear, inshallah? Any other questions about fasting? Yes. About the niyyah, yes. The niyyah according to the Hanafi school? According to the Hanafi school, the niyyah for Ramadan can be made all the way until midday. Till midday. It has to be done before dawn according to the Shafi'i school and the Hanbali school. But according to the Hanafis, all the way until midday. Any other questions about fasting? So the question is that for those people who have to feed 60 needy people, can it be done one time, or does it have to be done 5, 6 people at a time? It can all be done at one time. You can gather 60 needy people and feed them all in one sitting. It can be done like that, or it can be done one person at a time. And according to some scholars, you can even feed one needy person 60 times. Allahu Alam. I have a bunch of questions here. Let me get some. This is about shortening prayers. I'm not answering any questions that are not related to what we're talking about. So this is a question from a dear sister, Unity, I won't mention her, but she has been diagnosed with cancer. Please make dua for her that Allah Azza wa Jal grant her healing, quick recovery. Ameen, Ya Rabbi. She's under treatment. She's saying that she may not be able to fast. Therefore, what can I do to live the spirit of Ramadan and gain the most rewards from this blessed month? Well, I'm going to defer this question to the next session, because the next session has to do with the spirit of Ramadan. Does swallowing water unintentionally during wudu break your fast? Does swallowing water unintentionally during wudu break your fast? Here, the ulama say, depends whether you were being excessive or not. Because when we're fasting, we should do this gently. We should rinse our mouth and our nose gently. Okay? So if we're not doing that, if we're doing it excessively, like it is recommended to do outside of Ramadan, it should be thorough in rinsing the mouth and snuffing up the water when we are rinsing the nose, and gargling when we are rinsing the mouth. We don't do that in Ramadan. We do it gently. So if we're doing it gently, and despite that, by accident, some water goes inside, it does not break the fast. It does not break the fast. But if we're being excessive, and it happens, then it breaks the fast, because we didn't do what we were supposed to do. Allahu Akbar. The next question is, when do you stop eating suhoor? We already answered that. Sunrise? No. When do you stop eating suhoor? Sunrise? No, not sunrise. The break of dawn, which is about 90 minutes before sunrise. Can you explain which Fajr calculation method we should use? Can we just go by the masjid schedule? Sometimes the masjid schedule has Fajr later than my app, depending on the degree. Yes, I recommend that you use the Masjid app for Fajr calculation for the purposes of fasting. Okay? The Fajr calculation method that is being used by the Masjid is the safer method. So your app, the Fajr, yes, as you said, would be later in your app, not in the Masjid schedule. The schedule, the Fajr would be earlier. Your app, the Fajr would be later. Therefore, it is safer to use the Masjid app because you would definitely be stopping eating and drinking on time. Okay? And the Iqama time for Fajr is set based on the later time. So we are safe both ways. We don't pray in the Masjid Fajr too early. And we don't stop eating and drinking too late. For both, we have calculated it, not calculated, we have chosen the calculation that keeps us safe on both ends. And I'm not going into the details of this issue deliberately. For those of you who don't know this issue, don't worry about it. Those of you who know this issue, this is the answer, inshallah ta'ala. And one more piece of good news, that all 5 masajid of Collin County have agreed to use the same prayer calculation methods for Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and so you will see no difference in the Imsak and Suhoor times, Iftar times between the 5 masajid of Collin County. Everybody has agreed to use the method that Plano Masjid has been using for years. The next question is, if we're not sure how many days of fast we need to make up, can we make an intention to fast the rest of life while fasting on Mondays and Thursdays? You have to make that intention on those days. Fast on Monday, that I am fasting, make up. You cannot just do it now and forget about it. You cannot. It has to be done on those days before Fajr. By the way, when making up the month of Ramadan, even the Hanafi school requires that the intention be made before Fajr. Making up the month of Ramadan. When you're actually doing it on time, then it can be delayed until midday. How strict should one be while making this intention? And if one needs to break this make-up fast if needed, does it require a fidya? Make-up fasts are mandatory fasts. Therefore, they cannot be broken without a legitimate excuse. If one breaks them, then, as I mentioned, the Hanafi school requires the severe fidya, regardless of how you break a mandatory fast. But the Shafi'i school does not require the severe fidya unless the fast is broken by sexual intercourse. Can we follow the Isna prayer schedule to end our suhoor, which is a few minutes later than local masjid time based? You can, but I don't recommend. You can, but I don't recommend. The next question is request for dua. Are we allowed to brush teeth during fasting? Yes, you're allowed to brush your teeth during fasting. Just make sure that you don't swallow toothpaste. Okay, if you swallow any toothpaste, that will break your fast. General, there's a likelihood of swallowing toothpaste while you are brushing your teeth, so it should be avoided unless it has to be done. It should be done carefully. It is permissible. The Prophet ﷺ used to use siwak while he was fasting. So it is permissible to do that. Same thing with mouthwash. Just be careful not to swallow anything. Inshallah, are there any questions on the floor? Take maybe 2 more questions. I have to take a break. Yes. No, zakat does not have to be done in Ramadan. It can be done at any time throughout the year. Last question, inshallah. Let me see if there's anything here that I needed to share with you. inshallah. Let's take another break and we'll resume in about 10 minutes. The question is that if somebody forgets that they're fasting, so they excessively rinse their mouth, goes in, does that break your fast? No. Because when somebody forgets that they're fasting, something as a result enters into the body cavity, that does not break your fast. So that does not break your fast. Allah, take a 10-minute break.